morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Very happy to be here. Munir is back. Very
Yes,
happy to
hello,
be
Charles.
here again with you. A little problem with the cam, probably, but
Yeah,
fortunately solved very quickly.
yes. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to Spiritual Light. And today's Charles and me, at least at the beginning of the program, to talk about planetary genesis from a Spiritist perspective. So, we welcome you all. Nice to have you here with us to talk about this very interesting subject that was sort of very much developed by Kardec in the book Genesis according to Spiritism. Yes, Charles, I have a virtual camera. I mean, I can use the camera of my mobile phone, and the computer keeps on switching on that one instead of the its own camera. So I have some hiccups every now and then. So apologize for that. So as we mentioned, today we'll be talking about the planetary genesis, but from perspective from from Spiritism. And as I mentioned before, the book Genesis, written by Allan Kardec, is a book where Kardec talks about the theories that were current in those days regarding the material world. And then when I first read the book, I asked myself, why is that? So it's very interesting then for us to see what Kardec had in mind as someone coming from, with a background in pedagogy. He knew that it was important to give us the ground where we would then start this new perception of the reality of the universe as such, from our standpoint, from the place where we knew or thought we knew. So, Charles, what is your expectation regarding this topic, planetary genesis, from a perspective,
Yes,
spiritist?
interesting. So the title of the book is Genesis. No? In
Yeah.
fact, it's three books in one: Genesis, the miracles, and the predictions according to Spiritism. And the first book is about Genesis, according to Spiritism. And Kardec develops this subject very uh, extensively. The Genesis, of course, we had a story in the Bible. There is a part called the Genesis, explaining that the world has been created by God in 6 days. In fact, the same word used for days is also a word which means period in that language at that time. So the 6 periods has been changed into 6 days, 6 times 24 hours. And in fact, it's not the case. And the science, with the progress that happened at that moment, particularly in the already with Galileo Galilei, who was coming back on the heliocentric conception of the solar system, defined, demonstrated that it is not the sun turning around the earth, but it's the opposite, the earth turning on itself and turning around the sun. And so this was in 1600 something. And it was, of course, strongly rejected by the church because science was, for the first time, contradicting something which the original text from the Bible, and this was a kind of a scandal at that time. Now, of course, science has continued, investigations, other astronomers, in particularly in the 19th century, in France, for instance, with Arago, and then with Camille Flammarion, which knew Kardec. He was participating to the Society for Spiritist Researchers Studies in Paris, together with Allan Kardec. And at that time, science progressed a lot. Didn't care so much about the opposition of the church anymore in that 19th century, and progressed a lot in the knowledge and the hypothesis of the Genesis, how all this came albeit in the interval from there to now, more than 160 years, science has, of course, progressed again a lot. At that time, it was, of course, not question of a Big Bang and this type of things, universe in expansion and whatever. Nevertheless, there were already quite some good theories about how the solar system got formed, the sun in the middle, and the planets turning around it. Another point which is interesting, as I told, Camille Flammarion, he entered in the Society for Spiritist Studies of Paris in 1861. So he was very young. He had only 60. He was only 16 years old, and he knew Kardec, and he had already quite some good notions about astronomy at that time because it was one of his favorite subjects of study. And uh, during the sessions in the Parisian Society for Spiritist Researchers, he was medium and he was writing some communications that were signed by the spirit of Galileo Galilei, and which were exactly about the subject that Kardec developed later on in the Genesis, which is a general uranography. So how the solar system and the planets and the satellites and the comets and the Milky Way and whatsoever, the theories that were about that. Camille Flammarion was always in doubt about his mediumship faculty. He was saying and claiming it's not mandatorily coming from the spirit of Galileo Galilei because I had already the knowledge which was necessary to write those things by myself. And Kardec always answered to him, yes, it's exactly because you had already some notions of astronomy that Galileo Galilei used you to transmit this type of communications, which requires, of course, some knowledge with the medium, from the medium itself. And based on these communications, then from 1861, 1862, 1863, 1864, is that Kardec took the information, going also to science and making also a revision together with the same Camille Flammarion, that he wrote this chapter, this section of the Genesis, of this last book he wrote, the fifth. And what is remarkable is that the theory he's emitting as the most probable for the formation of the solar system, for instance, is still today the same most probable theory. So it is something which is quite remarkable because science evolved a lot in several aspects, in several knowledges. But on this one, maybe the intuition, the inspiration was such that the theory advanced by Allan Kardec is still, I mean, not 100%, of course, there are some details that have changed, but from the main principles remained unchanged compared with the description Kardec gave in this book, whose first edition was in 1868.
Yeah, it's interesting. So basically, yeah, of all the works by Allan Kardec, this is the one, the book Genesis, that deals with this aspect of the formation of the planet. And it's interesting to see that Kardec already, I mean, it had been established by, especially from the Spirits book, the answers from the Spirits, that the creation, I mean, there is God, and all the attributes of God are established there, or the main ones, they have been presented to us by Kardec, from the based on the information also from the spirits, and the creation as being basically done from two different aspects: the spiritual one, the spiritual principle, which is the elementary the element that gives rise to the individual spirits, and the material principle, And all this is actually everything that exists, visible or invisible, material or spiritual, is basically composed by these two principles, the spiritual one and the material one. And that they are not apart. Now, there's one part of the creation just for the spiritual element and another one for the material element. Actually, they are all in movement and all together. So that had been established, especially in the Spirit's book. And then Kardec brings this, how would I say, this ground from where we start now to understand the formation of our physical universe. And I was talking to Charles before and saying, when I first read the book Genesis, I asked myself, why did Kardec went in such a lengthy way to revisit all the theories, physics, chemistry, biology, and geology of his time, to actually contemplate that in the view and from the perspective of what the spirits had brought, especially in the Spirit's book, those ideas and this perception that there is God and the spiritual element and the material element as distinct elements in the creation, and that everything comes from that. The spirits actually, they come from the spiritual principle, and everything material, as I said before, or in the spiritual worlds, it comes basically from this principle, this element from where all that exists in material terms derives. So then Kardec goes and he visits every aspect of the world, and in my perception is that was necessary because that was what we were more familiar with, and different from other religions where you had to accept things that were related to the spiritual side as totally apart, with no connection with the physical world. To understand that, we had to start from something that we already knew, at least the theories that explained what we could see, what we could interact with in our material world. That's why he goes in this lengthy way to study all these, the formation of the solar system, the formation of our planet, the evolution of life here on Earth, the geological epochs here on Earth as well. And that was a question that was in my mind while I was going for the first time through Genesis. Why is he going in such a degree of detail? Because that was actually what we knew. If he started describing the spiritual world and everything that existed, how things worked there, it would be so distant from our understanding that we wouldn't be able to grasp at least the minimum necessary to understand that life here is I would say, particular condition in regard to life, different instances of life in the universe, in the creation. That the material universe, the material planet here is just one small condition that we have in this immense universe that exists. And basing on the principle where the universe was created, the spirits were created, then that should also explain our condition here, the formation of our planet, and all the process of evolution of the planet. And the beautiful thing when we study Genesis, and also when we go, and study our books regarding, astronomy, geography, whatever that explains not only the universe but also the planet itself. The beauty of that is that there is a driving force behind, because everything started as cosmic dust, as it were. And how come you have cosmic dust one day, and of course, after a long time, that cosmic dust has turned into this beautiful world that we have around us, varied in terms of life, the minerals, the animals, the plants, and everything. How come? You see? What's the driving force behind that? And all these has to make sense according to the teachings from the spirits. And this idea of God as the supreme intelligence and the primary cause of all things, and the creator of the spiritual principle and the material principle that are everywhere in constant transformation, in a constant process of evolution. So it was very interesting to see um, this Genesis from this perspective. But also, Charles, I want to mention that to you and listen to your opinion. Kardec, he keeps a lot of the Mosaic Genesis through Genesis according to Spiritism. He mentions a lot of the passages. And why do you think he did that?
But in order, how to say, because the Mosaic Genesis has also a source coming probably from the spiritual realm. The Ten Commandments have been inspired, what the story is saying, directly by God, or at least by good spirits or whatsoever. So all these principles in the Genesis, they must have some truth behind, as I told at the beginning, the problem is these old languages with the words who had several meaning, or where the meaning of the words changed. And this makes then very difficult the interpretation of those old ancient writings. And when Kardec shows that, I mean, science is not demonstrating that the Earth has been created in 6 days. It's simply a not scientific notion. But if you talk about periods, of course, we can then look and find some periods or eras or whatever which could correspond to that revelation who was in the Mosaic Genesis. It was not to shock frontally, I mean, those things, because a lot of people rejected Spiritism because exactly Spiritism was in contradiction with some of the teachings from the Bible. But most of the time, the contradiction is not really a contradiction. It's more, how to say, a correction of interpretation. And of course, I think this was a good strategy by Kardec in order to avoid too heavy frontal shocks with people who still are strongly attached to the letter, And that's why. And by the way, the comparison he makes is quite interesting. There has been some others, but this comparison by Kardec is, of course, interesting. But for him, it was always very clear. The last word has to come from science itself, from the facts. Even so, in this Genesis book, Kardec is also mentioning a very special principle, which is wisely anticipated from the modern epistemology, who appeared only in the next century, about Karl Popper or Imre Lakatos, about falsifiability, saying that the science is evolving, that the scientific law is only valid until someone demonstrates it's not valid anymore, or it has to be completed or whatsoever. So Kardec enunciated the same principle in the first chapter of the same book, the Genesis according to Spiritism, which is called, entitled Character of the Spiritist Revelation, where he says even the Spiritist teaching, they must progress with time and follow the new discoveries of science. So that's why Spiritist body of knowledge is absolutely not fearing the progress of science. At the opposite, it is encouraging, fostering this progress of science, because it will follow this progress, even if some of the fundamental points would have to be rejected or corrected, which in fact did not happen so far after more than 160 years. So Kardec was very wise already on this type of principles, showing it showing the difference between these traditional religions, very strongly bound to the letters, to the writings, and Spiritist body of knowledge, which is more bound to the progress of the thoughts and the evolution of science itself.
Yeah. You see, Kardec was so good at teaching that we can see that, because he never provokes a rupture from what we know, or at least what is accepted, and what the spirits are coming, and the result of his investigations and his studies and so on, because he analyzed what do we know. So he always starts from this point of view. What do we know? What is accepted today? Then he goes through the analysis of that, and then he brings into the light the teachings brought by spirits, or the conclusions that he arrived at, and put in view of that, and see what makes sense. And this is the work of a scientist. We always have a starting point, and then from that starting point we start to conceive new possibilities, new theories, and then we see if it makes sense. We check, and yes, it does. So we make a progress. So he just did not discard the Bible and the teachings from the Bible. He only gave a different meaning to that. As you mentioned, the words that we used were not the appropriate ones. And also the understanding of people, what is different. And like talking to a child. When talking to a child, we have to choose the right words that make sense for the child to understand the basic idea of what we are saying. So perhaps days were periods, and these periods weren't 24 hours, but, millennia and, thousands, million of years as we see. So I think this, ability he had to, go from a starting point, so he would catch everyone. It was a common ground, and then from there he would help us walk towards, what he wanted to show us. I think that was really, really brilliant. And in Genesis, when talking about the formation of our planet and so on, he was very good. But there's one question. We know, for instance, now we have a better understanding of how life started on Earth, although we have no certainty. When we studied that in depth, we see that there are many theories to explain, even in science. And then the ones that are most accepted or have the greatest number of evidences is the one that is accepted, until something happens or someone comes with a better one. And then people say, yes, this one is, it makes more sense than the previous one, so they will follow. So I would say, the ground where we step, even in science and regarding the formation of the universe, physical universe, our solar system, our planet, it is not, 100% clear and established. Basically, we support ourselves in acceptance of certain, theories and so on. And so we know that the organic life was formed here on Earth through this process. We shouldn't forget our Earth is 4.5 billion years old. So through this process, and we also see the universal forces acting over a long period of time. Nothing happened, from one day to the next. Things take a lot of time to get to the point where they are so elaborate as we see them today. We should also take into consideration the particular conditions, even in the physical aspect of it, of our planet. The planet had to present very special conditions, not one or two, but many conditions regarding so many different geological, chemical, atmospheric aspects, so that life would flourish here as we see it today. So we see that, it's been elaborate in a so careful way that it looks, even from a scientific point of view, that there's someone in charge of that. Because it is a beautiful work. It's almost like a masterpiece. The way, the processes that, took place here in order for us to arrive at the point that we are today, in terms of variety of life, the beauty of the complexity. When we study the human body, to think that it all started from cosmic dust. And, through a process you describe, this the most accepted even today, that there was this, matter that was gathering, especially in terms of gases and dust, that was gathering and, started to get hotter and hotter. And from there, we had our sun and all the other planets, including the Earth. And then the Earth went, cooling down over a long period of time, and then went through all the processes that we know. According to Spiritism, is there anyone in charge of this process, Charles? Is there anyone, overlooking?
This is exactly, I would say, the huge added value of the Spiritist body of knowledge, because it encompasses not only the material genesis, how the Earth and the planet and the minerals and whatever got formed, but also the spiritual genesis. So far, the spiritual genesis is almost absolutely ignored by the mainstream science. The mainstream science is only explaining the material genesis. So you gave a very good example. I mean, the Earth formed something like 4.5 billion years ago with the solar system. And after only 1 billion years, which is a quite short period, appeared the first forms of life, so-called life. So monocellular, very simplified beings. And it's an enigma for the science. The evidences of the formation of life, apparition of life on the Earth after more or less 1 billion or something like 3 or 3.5 billion years ago is admitted by science. Now, when they make trying to understand how it got formed, how the first DNA or got formed, then the story is a little bit more complex, because it is admitted that there were some kind of ponds, with mud and a type. It was not organic yet, of course, kind of a mineral mud. There were some kind of bricks that when you join them one to the other, you can form the first protein molecule. But there are so many combinations, so many possibilities, that when the scientists today start calculating the probability that the first protein got formed by chance, the probability is 10 elevated at minus 100 or something like this. So it's like you take a watch, you dismantle it completely, you put all the pieces in a box, shake the box, and then check the piece, throw the pieces on the table, and the clock got formed again, by chance. So probability is zero. You can do the same reasoning with an airplane or whatever. So they still do not have the explanation. Okay, no, it's by chance. The probability is very low, but we have now multiverse. I mean, a lot of theories behind. But where the added value of the Spiritist body of knowledge comes is, this is coming from the association of the Spiritist, of the spiritual realm, together with the material realm. And in fact, this combination has been driven not by chance or by pure mineral or material or chemical reactions, but through a kind of a model, a pattern, which came from the spiritual realm. So, of course, then when you ask it, is there someone or something behind this? Of course, God is behind all this. This you can say already. But we know also by studying the parallel evolution of the spiritual genesis and the material genesis, that there are some spiritual beings, some spirits, in other words, who were there in order to organize all this and to prepare all this when the material conditions of the Earth got favorable for it. And so what is explained by chance, or not explainable by chance, better said, there are other elements, information which came from the spiritual realm in order to form these first forms of life. And of course, what is known also is that the spiritual realm is not limited to the earth. There is a plurality of the inhabited worlds. Nowadays, we find a lot of exoplanets in different stellar systems, at least in the first time, not so far away from the Earth, or in the Milky Way. And then the probability of having this plurality of inhabited worlds is also strongly increasing. And from the spiritual realm, we know also that it is non-local, that it can move in the space, because the space and time, by the way, is a characteristic of our material world, and it's the spiritual world. There are some other dimensions or other notion of space and time. So the transport from these spiritual principles from a planet which is even a lot of how do you say it, year lights distance from here, can come almost instantaneously, and that this can be also organized by spirit entities. So the spiritist body of knowledge and the spirits themselves, they confirm, yes, there has been a team of spirits which was and which still is here on Earth in order to organize all this evolution from, again, this first protein molecule, the first monocellular being, to the most and more complex forms of life, first in the water, then going out of the water, then coming until what we are, human being and other similar forms of life. But all this is for the science, for instance, is only looking to the material aspects. So we need really to open, to have a wider lateral view, let's say so, in order to be able to understand perfectly how this came. And there is indeed, for sure, a strong influence, even a determining influence, coming from the spiritual realm.
It's interesting to think that, in Kardec's days, the idea of an atom was basically a solid ball, right? The change in the model of atom came afterwards, and today we went to the world that is so small that the idea of something solid no longer exists. We know that everything is in terms of energy, condensation of energy. There's the theory of strings, for instance. It's a concept to explain. So nothing is material in the subatomic world anymore. Nothing is palpable, solid, as it were. So it's easier for us to conceive that if there is a driving force, it could very well act on that level. Because the world that we experience is the result of so many interactions in the microscopic world that resulted in what we see today. So this idea of perhaps an invisible scaffolding for the material world, especially for the molecules that originated life, is something now more, I think it's easier to understand than I believe in Kardec's days. And that was the bridge Kardec was trying to make all the time. Let's see what our science has to say, what the spirits have to say, and see that we can see clearly that there is a bridge, but we can see that they are moving sort of closer in terms of direction. And today, I would say it's even easier to conceive that. There's also one question. The topic is planetary Genesis from a Spiritist perspective, and we've been talking about the book Genesis. Do you know any other book that further develops this idea of integrated world, spiritual world, material world, all coming from the universal cosmic fluid, this original simple kind of matter that originated everything that exists in the physical and in the spiritual world as well.
I mean, Kardec, again, he was very audacious to write that book at that time. And indeed, your question is very good, because when we look today, there has been some other books published even recently, for instance, comparing all what Kardec emitted as hypothesis with what science is saying today. It means 160 years later. And it is what you told at the beginning. I mean, accepting some details, he was quite right from the beginning. But I really do not know any similar book who has been written taking information coming from the spiritual realm in order to enter in more detail about those questions. And of course, why with Kardec it could not go much further. As we told, the astronomic knowledge, scientific knowledge was already quite advanced, so it could be used, this knowledge, in order to write this book and to describe the spiritual realm. But for instance, when you talk about the atom or quantum mechanics or whatever, this did not exist. So how could the spirit reveal something based on some concepts and theories that did not exist at that time, that came only 50 years later, and that even after 1905, the first time Albert Einstein wrote about this subject, it took something like 15 to 20 more years to be accepted in the different universities around the world. And even today, we see in this quantum mechanics and this general relativity and so on, there are a lot of anomalies still around. For instance, the dark matter or the dark energy, which is something like 95% of the matter. In order our equations describe what we are observing, they need to emit the hypothesis that we can observe only 5% of what is existing, or even 3% of what is existing as energy in the universe. So today, the things get much more complex, and we are entering deeper in these questions, showing also is this really is space and time existing, or is it some construction of our minds, of our consciences? The questions are really going now in this type of fundamental questions, and yet science is still ignoring almost completely the spiritual realm and all these elements that were brought by Allan Kardec that have not even been addressed and examined seriously by science. And this is really the call we have today. And once science is advancing on these concepts around what is not tangible matter, or it can be named tachyons or superluminous matter, or whatever the semi-material or whatever expression we may give. In my opinion, very hardly we will get some more information coming from the spiritual realm, simply because we are not ready yet in our concept in order to understand them.
Yeah. What came into my mind were actually, I think, one book by Emmanuel, Evolution in Two Worlds, I think was by Emmanuel Andre Luis. I can't remember. Yeah. Where he talks about the process of evolution as well. And
Yes, but it's more on the organic and spiritual. This aspect that has been ignored by science itself. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There has been some, and even this book is quite difficult to understand. Evolution in Two Worlds. There is another book which has been written in order to help understanding that book. That the poor Chico Xavier, with the education he had, he was not understanding what he was writing under the spirit influence.
Yeah. There's one question here. Hello. I haven't read the Genesis book yet. Would this book be difficult to read, understand when reading on our own? What do you think, Charles?
No, you can read it on our own. But the advice we give is, since it's the last book that Kardec wrote, I mean, which goes very deep into the subjects, you will better understanding if you read before the 4 other books of Kardec. So if we would advise a sequence as he wrote, Spirit's book, Medium's book, Gospel, then Heaven and Hell, and then Genesis, because it will help you to understand it much better. But you can read it by your own. Myself, I read it by my own. I did not follow any course or training about it, and it was perfectly understandable.
Yeah. And yes, I just want to mention, I think we'll have that on the announcement. We have a study group when we are studying the book of Genesis. It's always good because we share our perception, our understanding of things. It makes it easier. So if you want to join, I'll put in the announcement every Wednesday, lunchtime in UK time, which is summertime. So we have comments from Juan Amora. Allan Kardec was channeling the spirits who communicated, I believe, to bring the real Genesis, how the universe really works. Yes, the teachings, they came from spirit. Of course, Kardec troubled himself to compile what, especially in this book, Genesis, he compiled the current knowledge regarding, as we mentioned, the sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, geology, in order for us to accommodate the ideas or this extension that was, given to us by the spirits.
Small detail. I mean, Kardec was not a channel. He was not a medium himself. He compiled what was received by other mediums. But himself, he was not medium.
Yeah.
And one of them, as I told, was Camille Flammarion himself.
So also Genesis was more advanced than scientists over 150 years ago, and that they are just discovering today. Yes, as Charles has mentioned, Kardec, he presented some ideas and concepts that only today our scientists, beginning to confirm. Yeah.
I mean, on the material aspect, science was quite advanced already at that time, as I said. But on the spiritual aspect of it, how apparition of life or whatsoever, I would even say that science did not even start investigating it seriously yet. Today.
Okay. We have also Jesus promised to send the Spirit of Truth. He told his apostles he would return in a cloud, which means in the spirits, and he did.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay. So one more by Juana. Many spirits came and communicated. The Spirit of Truth, St. Augustine, and many others. Yes, St. Louis, and a group of spirits.
Astronomers like Galileo, like Arago, and so on. So they were part of those spirits who joined themselves in order to bring and to transmit this spiritist body of knowledge. And that was at the end organized and compiled by Allan Kardec.
Yeah. Okay. So I have one question here. We haven't talked about the actually the reason why would we need a planet to be formed? What was the main purpose of having a planet with life, with material life, and what was the reason for that? And I want to hear what you have to say, Charles, and I also have my perception of that. But
the purpose of the incarnation of the spirit in a material body is the main purpose, the main reason, the main objective is the progress, the evolution of the spirit. Okay? And at least this is necessary at our current level of evolution. Once we will be more evolved, we will not need anymore to reincarnate in heavy physical body as we have today. Okay, because again, the planetary genesis is only what we can see or detect with our instruments or whatever. So only the material planets. But aside these material planets, and even on each material planets, there are already also non-material world in the spiritual realm, and also on the planet, on each planet, a material planet like on Earth, you have already also a spiritual world which is everywhere around us. So we need to take, of course, all this into account.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget that the. Sorry, Chance.
I let you complement. No?
Yes, no. We should bear in mind that we are talking mainly about the material principle of the creation. There is the spiritual principle, and as we mentioned before, the spiritual principle is not something apart from the material principle, because the intelligent principle needs to evolve just as much that we see matter evolving. We also see the spiritual principle evolving. So when there is evolution, material evolution, there's also evolution of the spiritual principle that is also together with this matter. We see that in nature, the mineral kingdom, then the vegetable kingdom started to develop something else, sensitivity, not intelligence, of course, and then the animal kingdom until our realm. So at this point that we are individualization of this spiritual principle, but not completely raw from at the very beginning. No, it has already gone through a process of transformation over a long period of time to get to a point where it was ready to be individualized. So as individuals, in spiritual terms, we when we were individualized, we were not completely primitive as individuals, but not as a spiritual principle. It had been elaborated. So all this process that we see on the material side, we also see on the spiritual side. They work together. And as Charles mentioned, it is important for us to come back. There's also the spiritual earth, the spiritual levels here around the planet, which are also part of this planet. And we go there and come back many times, because this is a school. This is the lessons that we need. This is our kindergarten, because we are the kindergarten still in spiritual terms. In Genesis, Kardec gives a very nice example that helps to clarify our understanding about the reality of the material world and understanding the reality of the spiritual world, but in a very limited way. He said, imagine if those animals, or actually fish, living in the depth of the sea, where there's no light, it's total darkness. So their understanding of the world around them is one. If they could go to the surface and look at what exists, they would be marveled by everything. Everything would be so different. Everything will be completely beyond their anticipation, because the place where they were, was dark. In darkness, they had no organs to see light. not directly. You see, so everything was so confined in a certain context. It's the same thing here. We are spirits growing accustomed to the material world that we see on this planet, the conditions of this planet. And of course, our understanding is limited to the level of spiritual development we have attained so far. And, you know, when new ideas come to give us a glimpse of this life on the surface of the ocean, uh, we have to, you know, make sense of that according to what we know. That's why spirits come every now and then, and you know, they give us some insights, and then we have responsibility to go after those insights, and, you know, to do research and reasoning and so on, and develop in order to understand them, fully understand them. And then, you know, they will come at the different moments to explain a bit more, because you know, if they were to just dump everything on us, it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever.
Munir, there is an interesting remark by Juana.
Okay, yeah.
Stating, have scientists studied this book to aid them in the investigation of the universe? They should be taught in schools. This is exactly the opinion of I don't remember this doctor who was in UK saying that the Spiritist body of knowledge should be taught in the universities. Because, as I told, there are a lot of ideas about this, which can then help to explain the apparition of life and help to explain some things which are not or very hardly explainable nowadays. Even the existence of the spiritual world and the influences of the spiritual world with the material world, in particular in the phenomenon of the life, when we look ourselves in the screen or in a mirror, how is this? Is it my brain, the chemical reactions who made what I am, or do I have a soul which is, for instance, asking now, please raise your hand and make my hand being raised by the body. So, of course, I'm absolutely sure that a lot of these anomalies that we have in the current materialist paradigm of science will be solved by enlarging the paradigm. I say enlarging because it's not a substitution. The material paradigm is true for matter, but there is more than matter in the universe. And when we go to the spiritualist paradigm, of course, the materialist paradigm, the law of science, and so on, will remain valid. But there are other laws which are then coming in addition. And just as an example, for instance, of type of reflections we can have in this subject, we told we need the spirits, which is the spiritual, needs to reincarnate in the material body in order to progress. So we see that the spirit progress. What about the material realm? Does it progress as well? The question is, of course, we are progressing. We have more comfort. We have no computers. We have internet. We have a lot of things that did not exist even some decades ago. There is a technological progress undiscussable. But behind this, there is also some other principles, like the second principle of thermodynamics, of entropy, which is showing that in the material realm, the disorder is increasing. So it's not going in the way of progress, it's going in the way of disorder. Even at the point that we know today that the universe, which has started supposedly by a Big Bang 15 billion years ago, will also end in a kind of a similar period of 15 billion years ahead. Why? Because you see the sun, for instance. What is creating the energy of the sun? It's hydrogen, which is nuclear fusion together, giving helium. And through this, the deficit of matter is emitting the photons and the light of the sun. But the day there is no hydrogen anymore in the sun, what will happen? And we know it already. It will turn into a red giant, and at the end, the star will completely extinguish. So the universe, who had supposedly a beginning 15 billion years ago, will also have a death. It will disappear in something like 15 years ago. And compared to this, the spirit is always evolving. The progress is continuous. So the spirit will never ever disappear, but at the opposite, progress. So we can even ask, is it not such that somehow the spirit incarnates in a material body in order to take some of this entropy and convert it in a kind of a spiritual evolution? You know, it's maybe completely crazy what I'm saying, but there are a lot of food for thoughts. You know, only the fact, the hypothesis that the matter does not exist only in the way we know it today is already a huge revolution. And I'm sure the day where a lot of scientists will start thinking seriously about this hypothesis, then of course there will be a huge change of paradigm in the knowledge of the human being.
Yes, Charles. I think scientists, they look for insights. Sometimes they can't see a way out of or a solution to their problems, their puzzles. And I think the Kardec's book, especially Genesis, is very inspirational. You see, and for those who could consider reading it, I think they will find a lot of food for thought there, and perhaps insights that will guide them in their research. And of course, what Kardec is saying is right. They will actually make progress along that. If not, as
it will
Kardec
not be
said,
so quick and so easy, Munir, because the first reaction may be rejection.
yes,
A human being is like this.
Fortunately, yeah.
Change resistance.
Yeah. But if we look back, you see the turn from the 19th to the 20th century. If they knew what was coming in the following century, you see, and they thought that there's nothing else to learn. We basically solved all the problems. We have all the theories that we need, and two tiny problems unsolved yet that they said, oh, this is minor, we can sort it out in the near future without problem, led to the science of the 20th century. Okay, so it's very nice. We have food here for another hour, perhaps even more, but we have to end the program. But before we go, I have some announcements to make. Next week, the 5th of August, we have here in Spiritual Light with us our dear friend Humberto Watanabe. Watanabe will be talking about invisible connections, how thoughts shape ourselves and the world. This is very nice. It's also a continuation of this idea, the impact of our thoughts and the progress of the material world. We also have this coming Sunday, 7 p.m. British Summer Time, the 2nd of August, another episode of the series Marlene Nobri 2026. We'll have our dear friend Rafael Caldas talking about the book Healing as Magnetic Cure. So all invited to join us. There is the 4th International Spiritist Congress, Joanna de Angelis, Overcoming the Pains of the Soul, the Path to Mental Health. So we have here, it's August 28th to 30th in Portugal. So you can always find further information if you're interested in attending. Between 18th and 20th of September, the 9th European Spiritists Gathering. That will take place in Vergimont in Belgium. So all invited as well. We have a study group, an online study group. We studied the Medium's book. The study is coordinated by Charles, myself, and Guilherme Dias every Saturday, 10:30 a.m. You have here the QR codes or the ID and passcode for the Zoom platform. Most welcome to join us, 10:30 a.m. on Saturdays. And we also have a study of the book Genesis that we mentioned so much today. It's every Wednesday, 12 noon, UK time. You also have here the coordinates to join us. Oh, no, the coordinates are not here, unfortunately. So we'll have every Wednesday Zoom platform. If you go to the website of the British Union of Spiritist Societies, you will find further information about the meeting. It's free. You can join us. It's always a pleasure to have you there with us. Also invite you to go to the website of the Spiritist magazine and see what there is there. It's always interesting, very nice, interesting articles. So I invite you all to pay a visit to the website. And we want to express our gratitude to the British Union of Spiritist Society, to the Kardec Radio, the Irish Spiritist Federation, the Mouvement Spirit Francophone, and Life Spiritist Society in Denmark. So we thank you all very much indeed for your support in different ways. Gratitude to you all. So your final words before we go, Charles?
Thank you so much. So you see, it's a very interesting topic, and which can be developed a lot more. But of course, today we just gave an overview, and also to incentivize you to read this fantastic book of Allan Kardec, which is the Genesis. So thank you so much for following us.
Thank you all very much indeed. Hope to see you next Wednesday, same time. And it's been a pleasure to have you here and to share the studio with Charles. It's always very nice, and especially when we're here to talk about this wonderful book, Genesis. So everyone invited to read if you haven't read it yet, or to read it again, because there's always something new to learn. So exactly. From us, thank you so much, and hope to see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
God bless.